Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carner.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today is December 11th, 2025. And tonight's episode is all about the manufactured rebel. We're talking about Candace Owens. How the Orsini Rothschild Bloc built the anti-Israel conservative movement. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you guys listen to Candace Owens or not. She only gives you a little bit of truth, and she does not go into the detail of who actually controls the world. And so she just gives you just what they tell her to give you, and that's it. And if you do some research on who she married into wealth, like major wealth, the big wealth. And you're wondering why I'm wearing a coat. Well, my heater went out in my office. Heater went out, and there's nothing I can do about that except for replacing it. So I have to do that tomorrow. Welcome, guys, to Cause Before Symptom. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. We've got number one warrior is Surfer Wife saying good evening, family. Glad to be here. Heart, 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 heart. Well, thank you, Surfer Wife. Glad you're here. Boots is number two saying hello, Pastor James and the Rumble Airwaves and creator of ElitePotion.com. Hello, fellow warriors. Hoping everyone is feeling blessed to be here. Welcome in. New listeners, if you're enjoying the topic, please hit the thumbs up button. Thanks. That would help. Yes, hit the thumbs up button to help the show move forward. Number three warrior is Scorpion saying, hey, y'all, present but working. And Surfer Wife says, you getting a lot of rain like Washington? No, we're not. But tomorrow I have to check on the mining site because, well, the water's starting to rise now. It was fine up until they go, oh, let's go ahead and seed Pacific Northwest again. There's not enough people who are going poor, so they've got to seed the clouds and make some more atmospheric rain, of course. Anyway, and Scorpion says, hey, she got married over a Zoom call. Who? Oh, Candace Owens. If she did, that wouldn't surprise me. Oh, my God. And Claire is here, and Texas Militia. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Let's get into shitty, crappy breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
Well, Indiana rejects Trump's bid to do a gerrymander push and didn't work. U.S. sanctions 6 more ships off of Venezuela, oil tankers as well. It's about oil. Trump moves to stop states from regulating AI with a new executive order. And, well, I didn't know that states had their own deals with it, but apparently they do. Okay. So apparently Trump's moving to get the states to stop regulating AI. I have no idea what that's all about, and I don't care. Obamacare health subsidy to end as U.S. Senate rejects dueling remedies. Well, nobody can come up with a remedy that is good as a moneymaker. That's Obamacare. Dude, it's a big scam. And Tyler Robinson accused in Charlie Kirk killing. Apparently he was smirking and chuckling while he was in his first court appearance. And CBS decides to do a little thing on Machado, the gal who won the Nobel Peace Prize and who NATO and Orsini's want in Venezuela to, do her job. Because right now it's controlled by China, and apparently they call her a very tense, very wet secret mission. Oh, she's on a very tense and a very wet secret mission to get, I don't know, who gives a shit? I really don't know much about politics. I'm not a politics guy, but I got to tell you, everything that they tell you on the news is all bullshit. That's breaking news. When we come back after the short, quick commercial, we're going to talk about the manufactured rebel, how the Orsini family put in Candace Owens to fool you all into bullshit.
Every year, millions of Americans sign a contract they don't even know exists. They think it's just another tax return, but that signature means something far deeper. It starts with that first job at 16. The system takes a piece of her check, then promises to give some back if she signs the return. Every April 15th, the same cycle repeats, not by law, but by belief. The system didn't bind them, their own signature did. Learn the truth at unincorporatedassociations.com.
All right, we're back. The manufactured rebel. How the Orsini Rothschild bloc built the anti-Israel conservative movement. There comes a moment in life of every empire when the masks begin to slip and the voices that once defended the throne can no longer hold the crowd's attention. Well, that happened a few years ago, and the people started asking dangerous questions, questions that I ask. And the people started asking these questions, and they began to notice patterns that were never supposed to be seen. And suddenly, the illusion starts to crack. Well, Israel is no longer the sacred cow of the American right, because they're a terrorist country. Zionism is no longer untouchable either, and the spell that bound evangelicals to a foreign state began to dissolve. And for the first time in 70 years, Christians in the West are looking at the Middle East and realizing that the narrative they inherited is not the narrative that God wrote. Oh, it sucks to wake up. The elites felt that seismic shift long before the public ever sensed it. Well, why not? They have predictive modeling. They have the oracle. And they watch the polls change. And they watched the protests grow. And they watched the right begin to whisper the unthinkable. What if we've been lied to? Well, what if Israel is not what we were told? What if our loyalty has been weaponized? And the moment that question reached critical mass, the establishment had a choice. Well, suppress the awakening or lead it themselves. Well, they chose the same strategy they have used for centuries. And if you cannot stop the fire, you appoint the fire marshal. And that is where Candace Owens enters the story, not as a rebel, but as a response. Not as a whistleblower, but as a release valve. Not as a threat to the system, but as an upgrade to its software. You see, the right was waking up too fast, and Zionist control of the conservative mind was slipping. The old tools, Fox News, evangelical Zionism, neocon war theology, well, all that was breaking. And the Orsini Rothschild faction needed a new interface, a new messenger. A new trusted outsider who could criticize Israel without ever exposing the families behind Israel. So they crafted a rebellion they could control. Candace Owens did not rise organically. She was lifted, elevated, engineered. The daughter of inner city poverty, who somehow vaulted straight into British aristocracy, married into a House of Lords family, given access to Brexit's inner circle, positioned inside Daily Wire titans, and handed a global platform built by Zionist donors. You don't marry into the British peerage by accident. You don't join the hedge fund or aristocracy by luck. You don't get fired by Zionists for criticizing Israel unless the spectacle of your firing serves a purpose. Well, Candace was built to be the new face of acceptable dissent. The anti-Israeli voice conservatives are allowed to follow, and the one who can speak just enough truth to capture the awakening, but not enough truth to free it. She can condemn the bombs, but never the bankers. She never goes after the Bank for International Settlements. She can challenge the government, but never the dynasty. And she can question Israel, but never the Rothschilds who built it, and the Orsini clans who shield it, or the Vatican machinery that uses it. As her rebellion is choreographed, her independence is scripted, her courage is calibrated. Same with Dave from X22, Surfer Wife. Yes, they're all paid opposition. Dave is probably just an ex-CIA agent. And the timing here is perfect. The world is shifting. The beast system is aligning. The digital chains are tightening. And the throne in Basel is preparing its next move. And to control the right during the coming fracture, the elites needed a figure, well, who looks like she broke free, but is still held by the leash that you cannot see. And tonight, we pull that veil back. Tonight, we expose the architecture behind the actress. Tonight, we examine the new face of the old throne. the manufactured rebels sent not to liberate the people, but to lead them safely back into captivity. Welcome to the operation. Now, there are rare moments in history when the ground begins to shift beneath the feet of an entire nation, and those in power feel it long before the people do. The elites have instruments, polling firms, intelligence assessments, financial indicators, geopolitical risk models, and all of them begin flashing red at the same time. And for decades, the conservative movement in America served as Israel's most loyal soldiers. They signed the checks, sent their sons to fight the wars, broadcast the propaganda, and baptized Zionism into the bloodstream of Christian culture. Wow. But suddenly, something changed. A new generation of conservatives was no longer reciting the script. The cracks first appeared online as young Christians questioned why the nation they were told to bless seemed to bless no one in return. Veterans returning from the Middle East began posting their unfiltered experiences. Independent journalists began dismantling the sacred narrative. And the moment Israel's military actions were live-streamed to millions, the Western church felt a cognitive dissonance it could no longer suppress. The old Zionist theology, built in the 20th century and reinforced by Cold War propaganda, was breaking. The right was not just turning left, the right was turning awake. And this awakening was not political, it was spiritual. Something in the Western believer's heart realized they had been used or played. Something in the conservative mind realized their loyalty had been exploited. And for the first time since the formation of the modern Israeli state, a majority of young conservatives in America began shifting away from automatic support. That shift may seem small to the public, but to the Zionist power structure, it was existential. Israel does not survive without American evangelicals, and the Western banking dynasties do not maintain their Middle Eastern leverage without American conservatives. And the Vatican's long dance with Zionism collapsed the moment American Christians stopped playing the music. Well, the Orsini Rothschild axis, which manages the Western narrative, saw the danger immediately, and they watched the polls rise against them. They watched the influencers that they once funded begin questioning the very doctrines that they taught. They watched protesters appear not outside the Capitol buildings, but outside Israeli embassies. They watched an entire generation of conservatives begin asking forbidden questions. Who really built Israel? Yeah, who? Who profits from its wars? Who? Why does every administration bow to a foreign state? Why are half of our powers in Congress actually dual citizens? And why is criticism of Zionism treated as heresy? Well, these questions were radioactive. Well, that can't happen. Oh no, we're losing power. And once a population begins asking radioactive questions, the old mechanisms, censorship, shame, theological manipulation, well, they no longer work. The awakening had momentum, it had shape, it had defiance, and worst of all, from the elite perspective, it had memory. The people remembered COVID lies, they remembered Iraq lies, they remembered the intelligence failures, the media manipulations, the corporate betrayals. 3 buildings, 2 planes. Trust in the institutions that defend Israel had collapsed. And when trust dies, the old narratives become impossible to maintain. So the elites made their move. They could not silence the awakening. It was too widespread, too organic, too spiritually charged. So instead, they decided to guide it, to hijack it, to contain it, to make sure the people questioning Israel never questioned the families behind Israel, the banks behind the families, or the prophecies behind the banks. They needed a new voice, someone cute, young, charismatic, sharp, relatable, and already trusted by millions. You know, someone who could absorb the energy of the awakening and redirect it into a safe cul-de-sac. Someone who could appear rebellious while obeying the invisible lines. And the moment that need reached critical mass, a new truth teller was unveiled. Candace Owens. And she did not rise at the right time, guys. She rose at the necessary time. She rose when the old Zionist firewall failed. She rose when the base was slipping away. She rose when the empire needed a new shepherd for the flock that was wandering off script. Her emergence was not coincidence. It was a containment strategy dressed in courage. Every operation begins with the story, doesn't it? Like how was Israel involved in 9/11? How was Israel involved in the attack of one of our warships? How come they just seem to pop up and start shit with us, but we don't attack them? Oh no, we can't attack God's people. Well, Candace Owens' rise is often sold as a grassroots miracle. A poor girl from Connecticut who spoke boldly, shattered cultural narratives, and climbed her way into political stardom through sheer authenticity. Can it be true? Can it be true? Huh. Well, that's a myth. The documents that I have tell a very different story. And when you place her timeline against the movements of the institutions that adopted her, the pattern is unmistakable. Her transformation wasn't organic, it was engineered. Kind of like the whole Russell Brand thing when he became Christian. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm Christian. I love Jesus. Oh, we all have to now listen to the Vatican because they're right. They're right. They're everything you need. They have everything. And Jesus. Manufactured. He's an actor. Candace did not begin as a conservative. You have to excuse me. I'm having dry throat and all kinds of crap happening. She didn't begin as a conservative at all. She began as a left-leaning blogger. Left! Mocking Republicans as batshit crazy and predicting the GOP would die off. Well, that's not speculation. Hey, didn't Trump start off as a Democrat hating Republicans? It is explicitly recorded in her husband's profile file. Go look it up. And the irony is almost poetic. Her entire political identity flipped, not because she discovered truth, but because her own tech venture failed. And she blamed liberals for the backlash. Quote, I became a conservative overnight, unquote, she said in an interview. Well, overnight, the most suspicious word in ideological transformation. It takes time to shift from something you've supported all of your life. Real political awakenings take years, folks. They require experience, confrontation, humility, spiritual crisis. But Candace's didn't just come through revelation. It came through resentment. Her conversion was not a philosophical shift either. It was an emotional wound that conservative institutions immediately recognized as exploitable. Yeah. A young woman who speaks well, wants revenge, and has something to prove. Well, that is prime recruitment material. And enter Turning Point USA, the conservative money machine built and funded by Zionist megadonors, political strategists, and billionaire families who needed a new generation of messengers. T-Pussa, that's Team TPUSA, bad choice of a name, had a glaring vulnerability. Its leadership was almost entirely white and lacked the racial insulation necessary to survive accusations of bigotry. Candace wasn't just welcomed, she was absorbed into the organization, promoted instantly, and given a position far beyond her political experience. That was not talent recognition. This was strategic placement. And from there, the narrative of her rise practically writes itself. Viral videos, invitations to major conservative events, a meteoric elevation to debates, panels, speeches, and eventually a position with the Daily Wire. The Zionist stronghold of strong online conservative media. You cannot rise that fast without backing. You cannot go from obscure YouTuber to global political figure in 18 months without someone paying for the spotlight. Well, her backstory, hailed as inspirational, was actually the perfect camouflage. A young, beautiful black woman from humble beginnings criticized the left. That was the dream template for conservative strategists who needed a Trojan horse capable of disarming accusations of racism, sexism, or elitism. Her identity became her shield. Her rhetoric became their sword. And she was placed everywhere they needed her to be. Shame on you, Candace, for working for the bad guys. You're no Christian. You're working for the devil. But the most telling part of her origin story is not where she came from, but how quickly the elites claimed her. A woman who just discovered conservatism was suddenly speaking for an entire movement. Someone who hadn't studied geopolitics was suddenly advising millions on foreign policy. Kind of like Trump. Was never president, was a Democrat, then ran for the right. You know, our savior. Someone who had never confronted the deeper spiritual or financial architecture of world power was suddenly the face of the new right. And they bought it up. This is how controlled opposition is built. You don't train someone for years. You choose someone who owes their entire ascent to you. Someone whose story depends on the machine that elevated them. Because a person whose platform is a gift will always remain loyal to the gift giver, even when pretending to rebel. She's such a rebel. And then came the final seal, her marriage into British aristocracy, to a man whose father sits in the House of the Lords and whose career places him directly in the commodity markets historically dominated by the Rothschilds. Fuck me. A marriage that happened after only 3 weeks. As if someone simply signed off on a contract. Well, that's not destiny. That's acquisition. And Candace Owens didn't become a conservative voice because she discovered the truth. She became a conservative voice because a faction of global power needed a messenger who could carry their script into a new generation. So she wasn't chosen by the people. She was chosen for the people. Now, if you want to understand Candace Owens, you cannot begin with Candace Owens. You must begin with the machine that built her. And no machine shaped her more precisely or more quickly than Turning Point USA, the largest youth-targeted conservative political engineering project in modern American history. TPUSA, is not a grassroots movement. It is a student uprising. It's a polished, highly funded psychological operation designed to shape young conservatives before they ever begin asking dangerous questions. Like, who are the Rothschilds and why did they create Israel? Turning Point is the training ground of controlled rebellion, and Candace was its most valuable product. To the public, TPUSA masquerades as a spontaneous wave of campus activism. But in reality, it's a creature of billionaire donors, Zionist lobbying networks, and GOP strategists who understood that the future of conservatism would not come from Washington, it would come from Generation Z. And that generation needed shepherds. They needed influencers. They needed digital prophets who could preach the approved doctrine with the cadence of authenticity. Enter Charlie Kirk. Enter PragerU. Enter the donor networks behind the scenes. And shortly after, enter Candace Owens, placed into the system at the exact moment the organization needed a face that could shield them from racial criticism while amplifying their ideological boundaries. Truth hurts. Sucks, I know. The pattern becomes obvious. Candace did not find TPUSA. TPUSA found her, seized upon her sudden conversion, and turned her into the answer to every criticism that the left had thrown at them. A black woman denouncing Democrats? Oh, for shame. A former liberal attacking progressives? Get out of town. Someone who could speak in sound bites and ignite digital firestorms? Well, she was not just useful, she was perfect. My documents reveal her rapid absorption into the structure. Within months of reshaping her political identity, she was not merely attending Turning Point events. She was directing communications and speaking for the movement. And that kind of promotion is not earned, it's orchestrated. And it is how assets are placed, not how activists rise. TPUSA trained her in the 3 pillars of controlled conservative messaging. The enemy is always on the left. The hero is always the Republican Party, and Israel is always beyond reproach. How convenient. These were the rules of the machine she served then, and ironically, they are the rules she appears to violate now, but only because the same machine has assigned her to a new role. Even her newly branded anti-Israel stance is not rebellion against the T-Poussey worldview. It is an evaluation of the worldview, shaped by the same donors who now realize the next generation will not tolerate unquestioned Zionism. So they produced a new version of the Candace template, one that could criticize Israel without ever touching the Rothschild Orsini Foundation beneath it. Turning Point USA was her chrysalis. This was her, or this is where she learned the boundaries. You may attack liberals, but never banking families. You may expose cultural decay, but never the financial priesthood. You may critique politicians, but never the architects. You may reject the left, but never the Zionist spine of the right. And you may talk about corruption, but never about Basel, Switzerland. You may discuss politics, but never about black nobility behind them. And these boundaries were not written, they were absorbed. They became the shape of her political instincts, the ceiling of her courage, and the limits of her vision. And it was in this incubator, surrounded by wealthy donors, think tanks, and handlers. That's right, lost and win. T-Poussey. Isn't that what it is? TPUSA? T-Poussey? Isn't that what it is? That Candace Owens was not only built, but standardized. Yeah. A Zionist-aligned institution, standardized weapon. She became a product, a projection, a voice crafted in the image of the machine that needed her. T-Poussey did not teach her how to think. It taught her what not to think. It did not teach her how to fight. It taught her who she was allowed to fight. And Candace Owens was not empowered by T-Poussey. She was formatted by it. And once the formatting was complete, the next stage of her operation began. The elevation. Look, if Candace Owens' rise through Turning Point USA was the chrysalis, then her marriage into the British aristocracy was the metamorphosis. It was the moment the mask fused to the face and the moment the operation became permanent. The moment the world was introduced not to Candace Owens, the commentator, but to Candace, former the asset. Because no matter how loudly the media romanticizes it, no matter how quickly the public forgets it, no matter how fiercely her followers defend it, the truth remains extraordinarily clear in my documents. Their marriage was not the result of chemistry. It was the result of selection. Look, I've been studying the elite for years. And when you marry into a family of elites, you can't just bypass that and go, well, it's just a coincidence. Dude, she married into trillionaires. She married into the banker families. She married into the den of thieves. She married into the money changers. She married into the ones that Jesus fashioned a whip and beat them out of the temple. Does that not tell you she is a witch? Because she is a witch. They selected her, then elected her, and brought her into royalty. And according to the information that I have, George Farmer, that's her husband, is no ordinary businessman. He is the son of Lord Michael Farmer, a member of the House of Lords, hedge fund titan, commodities king, and major power broker inside the Conservative Party of the United Kingdom, a party historically intertwined with both Rothschild metals markets and Vatican black nobility political engineering. They're linked, baby. And T-Poussey helped her. This is not the world of free thinkers. This is the world of strategists, financiers, and bloodlines. And into this world, after only 3 freaking weeks of knowing him, Candace was suddenly invited, not courted, invited, then absorbed, and then acquired. The official narrative says that they met at a Tea Pussy UK event, the British counterpart to the American political incubator that had just finished formatting her. The timing is too exact to even ignore. Candace had just become the new face of Gen Z conservatism. She had just become the most effective weapon against the left's control over Black America. And she had just become a rising star within the Zionist-controlled conservative media ecosystem. And the moment she reached maximum cultural influence, she was pulled across the Atlantic and placed directly into a family whose political, financial, and aristocratic ties extend far deeper than anything the average American conservative have ever been allowed to understand. And then they ritualized her. Wouldn't surprise me if they laid her on a slab and did all their ritualing. Naked. Tea pussy! Tea pussy! To marry into the farmer family is to marry into the faction, okay? Not a household. Lord Michael Farmer was not only a hedge fund pioneer, he was a founding partner of Red Kite, like Red Shield, one of the most powerful firms in the commodities market. These are the same markets dominated historically by the Rothschild Empire. The metals cartels, the gold flows, the copper trades, the very backbone of Western economic sovereignty. That's not peripheral. This is the bloodstream of the global finance. And this is where Candace Owens' new father-in-law built his kingdom. But my files, they reveal even more. George Farmer was a member of the Bullingdon Club, the infamous elite-only Oxford dining society whose alumni include prime ministers, chancellors, intelligence assets, and aristocratic heirs. The Bullingdon Club is not a fraternity. It's a recruitment channel, a grouping chamber, a finishing school for the sons of European power. And its membership signals influence, pedigree, and access that stretches from Westminster to Vatican banks to Zionist financial strongholds. And Candace married into it. She's for democracy and a republic. Right. And Candace, a woman who had never lived in this world, never moved into these circles, never possessed the aristocratic resume required to enter that sphere, somehow bypassed every layer of generational gatekeeping and married into it in under 1 month. Can someone say she was drugged and then MK Ultra'd? No one ascends that fast unless they're being placed. No one is absorbed that seamlessly unless their utility has already been assessed. No one marries into the House of Lords without sponsorship, approval, and purpose. Candace did not marry George Farmer. She married the network behind George Farmer. Tea pussy! Through this union, she crossed a threshold from influencer to instrument. She became a bridge between the American Zionist conservative machine and the British Tory aristocracy. Two wings of the same Orsini Rothschild geopolitical organism. Her platform expanded, her access multiplied, her perceived legitimacy skyrocketed. And from that moment on, her voice was no longer her own. It belonged to the faction that adopted her. Yeah, but she stood up to Macron and her wife. And his wife. Who knows? All done on purpose. Macron was due for a humiliation ritual. We talked about humiliation rituals last night. Macron's in on it with the big boys. All boys. But Candace, she got played. And maybe when she started, she had, the right intentions. But she quickly married into the devil. Quickly. So her voice was no longer her own. It belonged to the faction that adopted her. Now, her marriage is the smoking gun that her followers refuse to see. They do. They refuse to even look at who she's married to, George Farmer. I mean, come on now. One of the big families. Now, they're not the black nobility, but they're linked directly to them. They're in the spider web of evil. And they refuse. They refuse to see because it does not fit the myth of the grassroots rebel. And she's getting away with it right in front of everybody, and nobody's doing anything about it. Well, rebels do not marry lords. Okay? They don't. It would be like Martin Luther King going golfing with the KKK. It just, they don't do that. Rebels do not marry lords. Outsiders do not gain aristocratic titles. Anti-establishment warriors do not suddenly become the Honorable George and Candace Farmer. But that is likely what happened. Her audience still sees her as one of them. Her handlers see her as one of theirs. And her marriage is the contract that binds those two realities together. This is why her shift on Israel was allowed. This is why her break with Zionist media was orchestrated. And this is why she can criticize Israel, but never the families that control it. This is why she is being positioned to lead the anti-Israel right without ever touching the thrones behind Israel. So she's not breaking free. She's being repositioned. And the ring on her finger says everything. Now, I don't blame her. I'm sure when she started, she really wanted to help the American people. Help stop the division, help with all of the racism and all of the freaking sexism and all the crap that divides us on purpose by the elites, and just, do some good for once. I'm sure that's what she wanted when she started. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. But when she got strong enough, she couldn't break from the spell of the devil. Something they knew about her, they used, and she caved and she went for it. And just like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who could have stuck with it and exposed the entire system. All she had to do is do a press release, a live press release. They all can do it. They have the power. And just say, the left and the right are owned by the bankers. The bankers are, and then start naming off the central banks, and then say those central banks are all controlled on this section by the Orsinis, and then the other central banks over here on this section is controlled by the Lee family. And they're the ones fighting it out. Okay? And I've been trying to show you guys the truth, and nobody's been listening, so she could have done that. She could have just came out and said the truth. Heck, I would have even taken the whole Archon shit, and I'd go, okay, she's got something. If she came out and said, look, there are these fallen beings, these archons, that are attaching to us, and they feed off of our negative energy, and the military refused to do anything about it, and unless we all come together and figure out a way to pray these archons out, there's nothing we can do. I would have bought that, too, and went, way to go. Even though it's not really fully the truth, at least it's closer to the truth, because that's what I'm looking for. But no, Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't name the people. She didn't, because she was scared. They threatened her family. I get it. She just doesn't have the balls and the know-how of becoming a prophet of God. Because believe me, if she was a true Christian and God could use her, she would have said these things. She would have told you the exact problem with the world today. So her and Candace Owens, they're not breaking free. They're just being repositioned And Candace, and the ring on her finger, said everything I needed to know. Now, to understand what Candace Owens becomes after her marriage, you must understand what her husband was given to oversee. You ever heard of an application called Parler? The so-called free speech alternative to Twitter that conservatives flock to in the aftermath of the 2020 election? Well, most people still believe Parler was an organic uprising against big tech censorship. Oh, but the Lord family owns it. It wasn't. It was a digital containment zone built to corral, tag, and monitor the very population the elites knew would rebel first. The same with Trump's Truth Social. We all gave into that one and gave Trump our cell numbers and emails and birthdays so that they can use that and pray to Satan. And into the center of that operation was placed George Farmer, Candace Owens' newly minted husband, a man with no background in tech, no experience running social networks, no history of building digital platforms, yet suddenly, out of nowhere, he is appointed CEO of one of the most politically volatile platforms in the world. At the exact moment the intelligence community needed eyes on every angry, delusioned pro-Trump voter in America. Well, my documents that I found spells it out clearly. Farmer took over Parler in 2021 after Amazon, Apple, and Google all coordinated to shut the platform down following accusations that it enabled extremism. But what the public never knew is that Parler had already been heavily infiltrated by federal agencies long before the shutdown. And the shutdown itself forced every user to re-authenticate, allowing the collection of fresh metadata and identity verification at a scale that would have been difficult to obtain otherwise. Parler wasn't banned. It was just reset. And after the reset, George Farmer became its custodian. How quaint. No one looking at this with clean eyes believes that was a coincidence. Farmer's background, aristocratic finance, Bullingdon Club membership, close ties to families whose wealth intersects with Rothschild metals markets. It's not the resume of a startup CEO. It's the resume of someone who can be trusted to oversee a politically sensitive intelligence adjacent asset. And when the right began migrating to Parler in mass, the elites did what they always do when dissidents gather. They build the room, they guard the exits, and they watch everything. So Parler's greatest utility was not a competitor to Twitter. It was a conservative census. And it worked brilliantly. It was a map, a directory, a psychological profile database of American dissenters. Boom. Every post, every follower, every private message, every network connection, every radicalization vector, every node of influence, every potential leader who might rise outside the establishment's control was in the fingertips and control of the enemy. And it just so happens that Candace's husband is the man overseeing this data surge. The man given this trove of digital political consciousness was the husband of the most influential conservative influencer in the United States. That's not a marriage. That's an operational consolidation. Why isn't the media speaking about that? Well, because the media are controlled too, just like Candace. I've told you guys over and over and over again, I don't know what the real number is, but there is a number. When you finally, with your own efforts, without any money backed up, and you alone, or even if you have a team, but it has nothing to do with any of the secret societies, and you get at least 1 million followers, 1 million people who take you seriously, who like what you say, you are a threat to national security. And you will get a knock on the door about what you're saying and what you can and cannot do anymore. That's a fact. I just don't know what number it is. I say 1 million because if you could get 1 million people to stop buying a product, you could hurt a company. Not a lot, but enough to where they may not have profits and lose some investors. So people with platforms like that who have millions, they are completely controlled. And don't think that they're not. And Candace is completely controlled. Don't think that she's not. She is working for the devil. Now, I'm sure she's a great lady. I'm sure she's going to make a great mama. But who she married into speaks it all. Now, you could say, yeah, she's infiltrating them, and this is the white hat's way of getting through and taking over families. No, believe me, when they're taken over, they don't do it publicly. Never happens publicly. Not like that. I don't buy that. But the man overseeing Parler is a dude who knows nothing about social media and has the ability to influence all of those consumers and those conservatives that moved from Twitter to Parler when it came down to politics. So what they have is not a marriage. It's an operational consolidation. And note the timing here. Candace married George in 2019. Parler exploded in late 2020. It was deplatformed and restructured in 2021. George Farmer was inserted immediately afterward. It was like a handoff, a pivot, a next phase. And Candace's followers believe she married a godly, aristocratic patriot. Anytime you say aristocrat, you can't put godly in with that word. You just can't. In reality, she married into a faction of the Western intelligence financial architecture whose job was to manage the populist revolt that the elites themselves had engineered through lockdowns, inflation, and electoral manipulation. The elites knew the right was about to erupt, so they built a cage for the eruption, and they called it Parler. And when they gave the keys to the husband of the woman who would later lead the anti-Israeli conservative awakening, hello? This is why her anti-Israel turn makes sense. This is why she was never censored into oblivion. And this is why she was never deplatformed at scale. This is why she can say what she says today while still remaining inside the algorithmic spotlight. She's not an outsider criticizing Israel. She is the spokesperson for a new phase of the same machine, one that needed to evolve as the public outgrew the old version. And believe me, she's gonna find some data about Israel and go, "Oh, I was wrong." Candace's public persona is the performance. Her marriage was the acquisition, but Parler was the integration. Don't shout me down because I'm preaching good. Which brings us to the next stage of her ascent. The moment the Zionist media empire itself elevated her to maximum influence, preparing her for the controlled rebellion she would later embody. T-Pussy! T-Pussy! Every controlled opposition figure must undergo a ritual moment of public betrayal. And the system that built them eventually must cast them out. Not to remove them, but to rebirth them. This is the satanic way. And it's the oldest strategy in psychological warfare. If you want the people to believe someone is independent, you must make it look as though the establishment has punished them. And no stage was more perfectly engineered for that illusion than Candace Owens' highly publicized break with the Daily Wire, the Zionist fortress of the American right. And to understand the brilliance of this move, you must understand that the Daily Wire actually, and what it is, it's not a media company. It's an ideological filtration device, funded and influenced by some of the most powerful Zionist donors in the country. And its job is simple: shape the right-wing narrative, keep it within the approved boundaries, and ensure that every conservative influencer remains safely under the dome. Ben Shapiro, not a rebel. He's just a gatekeeper. He is the firewall between the conservative base and any truth that threatens the financial, geopolitical, and spiritual interests of Israel. So when Candace begins inching toward criticizing Israel, the world interpreted what happened next as a fight between two strong conservative voices. But that's not what happened. The entire firing, the tension, the online exchanges, the silence, the dramatic exit was scripted more tightly than a Hollywood plot line. Because it had to be. How else are you going to fool all the idiots? Because the elites knew exactly what effect it would have on the public psyche. It would transform Candace from a Zionist-sponsored star into a renegade warrior who speaks truth to power. Her brand depended on it. Her next assignment required it, and her followers demanded it. And the elites leveraged it. Candace's criticism of Israel was never existential. It never touched the banking families who built the state. It never exposed the Rothschild Balfour pipeline. And it never confronted the Kabbalistic elite inside Tel Aviv's political structure. It never traced Zionism back to the black nobility, the Vatican, or the Bank for International Settlements financial system. It was surface-level objection, moral outrage without structural analysis. It was emotion without revelation. And yet the Daily Wire treated her comments as though she had pierced the heart of Zionism itself. Why? Because the narrative demanded a sacrifice. The system needed a public rupture to baptize her as a legitimate in the eyes of the awakening right. And it worked. And the brilliance of the operation is in its symmetry. If the Daily Wire had kept her, she would have looked complicit. If the Daily Wire had silenced her off camera, she would have seemed censored. But by firing her publicly, they gave her the greatest gift of controlled opposition figure can ever receive. She's a martyr. Martyrdom. Her audience did exactly what the machine predicted they would. They rallied all around her. They praised her courage. They elevated her to a new kind of influencer. One who could criticize Israel and survive. A rare figure, a mythical figure, a prophet of the new right. But look carefully at what did not happen. She was not banned from social media. She was not blacklisted by major platforms. She was not shadow banned like genuine dissidents. She was not smeared by intelligence-linked journalists. She was not financially crippled. She did not disappear. But somehow, miraculously, she grew because God's saving her. No. No true threat to the global Zionist order is ever allowed to grow. Point taken. Her firing wasn't a punishment. It was a promotion. And her departure from the Daily Wire was not a break. It was a graduation, and the system did not reject Candace Owens, period. The system released Candace into the next phase of the operation, the controlled anti-Israel narrative designed to intercept the awakening conservatives who were slipping away from the Zionist theological empire. And this is why the timing lined up perfectly with the shift in public sentiment. This is why her independence emerged right when the elites needed to rebrand the right's relationship with Israel. And this is why the narrative felt rehearsed, because it was. This is why her audience believes she is finally free, because that belief is necessary for the next part of this script. Candace did not break from Zionism. Zionism broke from her, strategically, theatrically, prophetically, to give her the credibility she would need to lead a portion of the right into a new curated form of dissent. She's not a whistleblower. She's not a fugitive. She's not even a victim. She's the approved rebel, cast out by design, elevated by exile, and repurposed for the next chapter of the beast's political evolution. Now, the greatest fear of any ruling power is not revolution. It's unpredictable revolution. The kind that begins outside its surveillance, outside its influence, outside its psychological reach. And this is exactly what began forming inside the American right after the events in Gaza. For the first time in modern political history, conservatives, especially younger Christians, began to drift away from the Zionist narrative that the establishment spent decades constructing. That wasn't a minor policy disagreement. This was a tectonic shift in worldview. And the elites saw it immediately because the polling changed. The tone online changed. Sermons quietly changed. Even Fox News viewers began asking questions that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Why do we fund this? Why do our politicians bend the knee? Why do evangelicals treat a secular state as prophetic? Why are we told that criticizing Israel is dangerous? The entire spell was cracking. They needed T-Pussy. And the Orsini Rothschild Bloc, the axis that built modern Zionism as a geopolitical instrument, understood that if they allowed this awakening to continue uncontained, it would spread beyond Israel. It would lead Americans to the throne behind Israel. And it would force Christians to examine the financial priesthood, the bloodlines, the black nobility, the BIS networks, and the globalist machinery that has been hiding behind the Star of David for a century. If you don't know who killed Charlie Kirk yet, you're not seeing the big picture. It was Israel. They needed the martyrs. They needed a death to get our eyes off of them robbing, pillaging, stealing, destroying, murdering innocent people. What Israel does. Because they're a terrorist country disguised as a godly people. So what do the elites do when the people begin to see behind the curtain? Well, they build a new one. Here's a new curtain you can look at. This beautiful Candace Owens. Here you go. A more convincing one, too. She is. She speaks without saying, or like I do. A more relatable one. A more emotional one. They don't try to stop the awakening either. They try to own it. Thus, the necessity of Candace Owens. Now, the establishment needed a figure who could express the outrage conservatives were feeling. The disgust with war propaganda. The fatigue of endless conflict. The weariness of Zionist manipulation. Without ever letting that outrage escalate into a full-scale revolution of who actually controls the West. Well, Candace became the perfect solution. And her anti-Israeli message was not evidence of independence. It was evidence of strategy. Welcome to being controlled and manipulated by the CIA, folks. They used to do that to other countries. Now they're doing it to your own. I'm not doing it. Candace was the strategy. And because without her, the anti-Israeli energy on the right would have flowed towards dangerous territory, towards genuine researchers like me, toward true dissidents, towards Christians learning the real history of the Rothschild creation of Israel. The Vatican's geopolitical bargains and the Orsini family's involvement in the Middle East chessboard. Candace redirects that energy back into safe hands. She gives the awakening a leader who appears courageous but remains bounded. So she lets conservatives vent without escaping the enclosure. And she lets Christians question Israel without questioning Zionism's architects. She allows dissent, but only dissent that never touches the families who elevated her. That's the brilliance of controlled opposition. Give the people 60% truth to make sure they never discover the other 40%. Candace's criticism of Israel operate at the emotional level as she condemns the violence, the propaganda, and the hypocrisy, but she never exposes the dynastic machinery behind it. I've never even heard her say anything about the Rothschilds' financial pipeline that shaped the state, or the Orsini-Vatican alliance that midwifed Zionism, or the central bankers who use Israel as a geopolitical firewall. I've never heard her talk about the intelligence networks that operate inside American conservatism, or the role of the Bank for International Settlement in the Middle Eastern restructuring. I've never heard her talk about any of that stuff. Her job is to make sure the right questions the policy, but never the power. To question the state, but never the families. To question the actions, but never the architecture. To question Zionism, but never the beast system behind it. That's how you control a rebellion, not by stopping it, but by leading it. Candace is not the liberator of the conservative mind. She is the gatekeeper of its awakening. And she catches the flock the moment it escapes from the Zionist barn and gently guides it into a new pen, one shaped to look freer, wider, more honest, and more rebellious, yet still fenced in at the edges by the same powers that built the old enclosure. You see, the right believes they have broken free, but in reality, the elite simply built them a larger cage. And Candace Owens was hired to hold that door open. Sorry, truth hurts. Every controlled figure reveals themselves not through what they proclaim, but through what they consistently omit. Silence is the true confession of allegiance. And when you examine Candace and her body of work, her books, her videos, her broadcasts, her tweets, her quote compilations, a pattern emerges so strong, so consistent, so revealing that it becomes impossible to ignore. The woman has an opinion on everything, manages to avoid the very topics that would expose the throne that she serves. Are we that naive? Yeah, we fall for it every time. This is why nothing ever gets done. A curated anthology book that I uploaded about her quotes her about wisdom. It's the clearest artifact of these boundaries that she has. Page after page showcases her thoughts on race, abortion, feminism, Democrats, cultural decline, Trump, the media, even religion. But the table of contents itself is the indictment, because every topic she covers is safe, superficial, allowed, and approved for mass consumption. And look at what's missing. And it's not by accident. It's actually by design. She never speaks about the Rothschild dynasty. She never addresses the black nobility. She never mentions the Orsini bloodline. She never discusses the Vatican's geopolitical machinery. She never names the architects of central banking or who the Jesuits are. She never questions the Bank for International Settlements. She never touches BRICS in any meaningful geopolitical context. She never exposes the intelligence agencies that shape American conservatism. She never speaks about the Geneva-Basel-Friedberg axis, the beast's counterfeit trinity, something I exposed no one's ever heard of before. She never investigates how Zionism was financed, midwifed, and weaponized by Western elites. But she will condemn corruption at the bottom of the pyramid. But she'll never expose the cabal at the top. And this is the hallmark of controlled opposition. Candace is fearless only where fearlessness is harmless. And she's bold only where boldness is beneficial to her handlers. She is outspoken only where speaking costs nothing. Now, I saw her in her interview with, I drew a blank. Forgot the dude's name. But she's really great at, making another person feel like a moron. So she is really good at her job. And she's fooled a lot of people. But the moment the trail leads to real power, to the globalist infrastructure, to European bloodlines, to the financial priesthood, to the dynasties that built modern Israel, her voice vanishes. Some people might say, well, it's because she's scared. She doesn't want to. No. She married into them. She's never gone near the true forbidden subjects of geopolitics. Not once. Not even accidentally. And her omissions are not intellectual. They are contractual. Because the people who elevated her, the people who placed her in Turning Point USA, T-Pussy, the people who handed her a Daily Wire platform, the people who embedded her into the farmer aristocratic line, operate inside those very structures she dares not name. Scorpion says, Charlie Kirk told his followers to stay away from the Ethiopian canon too. Wow. I did not know that, but it wouldn't surprise me because I know that Charlie Kirk, sorry, part of the problem. Because he's out there still dividing. He was. He wasn't bringing anybody together. He was trying to prove that he was right. And the people on the right are right. And that doesn't bring people together. You got to bring people together and take politics out and start loving your neighbor. If Charlie was loving his neighbor and wasn't taking money from Zionists, then Charlie would have been wonderful at what he was doing. But he wasn't anointed by God. I'm sorry. And neither is Candace Owens. And if she were truly independent, her curiosity alone would have led her into the archives of deep power. She would have asked why Israel was created through a British mandate funded by a banking dynasty. Why? She would have questioned why conservatives bow to a foreign state. Why? She would have traced Zionism back to its occult, political, and financial roots. She would have confronted the uncomfortable truth that that the same families who dominate Western banking also dominate Western conservative politics. If she would have never married into the farmer family, I would have still believed that she was at least trying. But that was the worst mistake she's ever done. But she's never curious in the direction of the truth. And she's never outraged in that direction. And she's never investigative in that direction. So her silence is not ignorance. It is loyalty to the bankers. And the elites allow her to criticize Israel's actions. Sure, as long as it never criticizes Israel's founders. They allow her to question Zionism's behavior as long as she never questions Zionism's owners. So they allow her to stir the right-wing awakening just as long as she never leads it beyond the psychological fence that they've constructed for it for decades. Remember, there's God's chosen people. And Christians need to roundabout. Whoa, they have a different religion than what we do. We're Christians. Jesus paid the atonement. We're not Jews anymore. There is no more God's chosen. Why are we supporting a state that sponsors terrorism? Why are we supporting a state that has terrorized our own country? And it's a fact. They blew up one of our Navy ships in the 80s. And we just conveniently overlook that, go, well, you know. While we continue sending them, what, $20 billion a month? More, if not more? Where does all that money go? It doesn't go to the homeless, and most certainly isn't going to the people of the United States of America. You want to know from 0 to 100% how much we're all being played? Most people who have their head in the sand think it's only about 10 to 20%. When the reality, it's 100%. I was just telling a friend earlier about how every city, every county, every state, every country has a family running it, controlling it, stealing, killing, and destroying. Every faction. And above them is a family. And above them is a family that control them. It goes all the way down this pyramid of satanic influence worldwide. You can't escape being in the world that's being controlled by the devil. We live in a fallen world. He is in his last attempt to create one last new world order before he's sentenced and cast into the lake of fire. What else do you expect? And he took control of the world faster than any time period you could ever see. 250 years. That's all it took. Go look at how many ships America has compared to Russia or China. We've got like 3 times more than they have combined. America is the global superpower that polices the world until they're ready to usher in the Antichrist. America was groomed for it. They didn't care if there were Christians in it. As long as they continued to believe and pray for their own military, Christians' own prayers for their own government and country brought Satan to his elevation. Boots says the USS Liberty was attacked in 1967. Okay, I was wrong. I thought it was the 80s. There was another attack in the 80s, though, Boots, by Israel. They attacked something. They blew something up. It was Israel. So back to Candace. This is why she was fired from the Daily Wire for criticizing Israel functionally, but not spiritually, structurally, or historically. She was just far enough to appear rebellious, but not far enough to threaten the dynasties above Ben Shapiro. A real dissident's boundaries are porous. A controlled dissident's boundaries are fixed. And Candace's boundaries are carved in marble. She can say Israel is wrong. She just can't say Israel was built by the Rothschilds as the Western fortress of the beast system. If she said that, I go, oh man, she's onto something. She can say the IDF acted immorally, but she cannot say the IDF answers to the same families who run the central banks. She can say Ben Shapiro is biased, but she cannot say Zionism is a geopolitical weapon. So her silence tells the whole story. Which brings me to the next part, the psychological architecture behind the silence here. And the role it plays shaping the modern controlled awakening. You see, if you strip away the makeup, the rhetoric, the applause, the controversies, the curated image of independence, what remains is not a woman, but a mechanism. A psychological device engineered to manage a population entering a phase of spiritual and political awakening. Candace Owens is not simply speaking, she is performing. And the performance follows a script older than modern politics, older than media, older than the nation state. It's the archetype of the manufactured rebel. The person who looks like a threat to the system while functioning as part of its immune system. And to understand her, you must understand the doctrine of controlled opposition. The strategy empires use when awakening begins to escape their control. When people start questioning the narrative, the empire does not silence them, because that would confirm their suspicions. Yet instead, the empire builds a hero for them. A figure who seems brave, relatable, independent, and unfiltered. Someone who channels their anger, grief, and confusion, but never allows that energy to actually reach the architects of their suffering. This is the psychological brilliance of Candace Owens. She embodies rebellion while protecting obedience. She projects independence while serving alignment. She amplifies dissent while redirecting revelation away from the throne. Every psychological lever she pulls is intentional. The betrayed insider archetype. After the Daily Wire firing, she appears as someone punished by the establishment for telling the truth. Well, this is the classic PSYOP technique. The false martyrdom narrative. It builds trust faster than any policy position or ideological consistency. Next is the emotional mirror. She expresses anger, outrage, frustration, and boldness in the exact tone millions are emerging dissidents feel, allowing the audience to see their own awakening reflected back at them. That creates attachment, emotional bonding, identity fusion. And there's the half-truth strategy. She exposes corruption at the surface level, the media lies, political hypocrisy, moral decay, which are real enough to resonate but shallow enough to protect the deeper networks. Half-truths are more dangerous than lies because they build credibility for the messenger while concealing the remaining architecture. Then there's the boundary illusion. She appears fearless, but only where fear is convenient. She never crosses into the realm of global financial power, banking dynasties, Vatican alliances, or Zionist aristocracy. The audience senses rebellion, but they never encounter revelation. Then there's the savior substitute. She functions as a stand-in leader for conservatives who are losing faith in institutions, as her voice becomes a guiding light, giving people the illusion that the movement already has a champion, preventing them from seeking a real one. This is why her influence is so effective. The operation does not require her to deceive with falsehoods. It requires her to redirect the truth, to blunt the awakening, to steer millions of minds away from the spiritual and geopolitical center of the beast system. So Candace is a diffuser, not a detonator. She diffuses the fire so it doesn't burn the throne. She diffuses the outrage so it doesn't reach the priesthood. She diffuses the awakening so it never becomes a revolution of understanding. They keep doing this to us, guys, and we continue to just eat the bait. Her purpose is not to silence, but to standardize it, package it, domesticate it, and put it back into the public. To make sure that the energies rising within the conservative movement remain manageable, predictable, and ultimately harmless to the forces that installed her. Same with the whole Q movement. That was all made up to get you to eat your popcorn and watch the elite eat your ass, pretty much. The elites know that a population without a leader is dangerous, but a population with a controlled leader is contained. So they built a leader. They gave her a microphone stage, gave her controversy, an aristocratic husband, and the illusion of exile to a martyr's storyline. And in doing so, they gave the awakening right a shepherd who will lead the flock to the mountaintop, only in circles around the foothills. So she's not the voice crying in the wilderness. She is the voice echoing inside the cave the elites designed. Hey, as long as she remains a symbol of conservative awakening, the awakening will never reach the source of its oppression. Which leads us to the final stage, the ultimate purpose behind her positioning. All controlled opposition has an expiration date. It isn't designed to last forever, but it is designed to function at a specific moment in a regime's timeline. The moment when the old illusion collapses and a new one must be installed quickly before the population realizes what they actually are looking at. Well, Candace is not just a media figure. She is the transition mechanism engineered for a world that is about to split in two. The West is entering a managed collapse, a controlled demolition of its own political, financial, and cultural structures. The banking dynasties have already moved their gold operations eastward. Let me repeat that. All precious metals that are to be hoarded are moving eastward. The BIS is preparing a digital currency. BRICS is expanding like a rival kingdom rising from the sea, and the Vatican has shifted its priorities towards a global governance and ecological religion. The intelligence agencies are bracing for domestic unrest. And the American right, the last psychological holdout against the beast's full consolidation, well, it's fracturing. And the elites knew this would happen because they made it. They've always known. They designed it. The political divide is no longer left versus right. It is now controlled right versus uncontrolled right, controlled right versus uncontrolled right. The establishment cannot afford millions of Christians, conservatives, and independent thinkers waking up simultaneously to the spiritual and financial architecture behind Zionism, global banking, and the Western throne. An uncontrolled awakening would ignite a movement the elites could not predict, contain, or neutralize. Now you know why I only have a couple hundred people on YouTube that watch me. Now you know I only have 9 people watching me right now. I am dangerous to the bankers. So they controlled and created a controlled awakening. And Candace is its primary steward. And her role is not to unite the right. Her role is to divide it into 2 predictable camps. One, Camp one is the blind Zionists who cling on to the old order and follow the Shapiro-Netanyahu axis into the coming digital enslavement. And number two are the awakening conservatives who reject Israel but remain tethered to the aristocratic networks that shaped Candace, thus never escaping the system that manufactured both the Zionism and the rebellion against it. The elites are building two pens. Candace is the shepherd of the second, as she gives the illusion of choice, illusion of escape, and illusion of awakening. But the awakening she leads is bounded, engineered, and designed to prevent the crowd from discovering the engine of their captivity. And the Bank for International Settlements, the global central banks, the Vatican Orsini shadow hierarchy, the Rothschild metals empire, and the Zionist geopolitical construct, and the brick symmetry and the beast trinity in Geneva, Basel, Friedberg, all are in on it. That's the engine of our captivity. And they know the right is losing faith in Israel. They know the old Zionist narrative is dying. They know Christians are questioning the theology that shackled them to a secular state. And they know the next war, the prophetic one, will require a new alignment of loyalty. So they reassign Candace to interrupt the defectors, to comfort them, to guide them, to claim she stands with them, and to keep them locked inside a narrative that cannot threaten the global families preparing the next stage of the world government. So Owens is not the leader of the rebellion. She's the manager of the contained line, the firewall that prevents the awakening from touching the actual architecture of power. Because if the right ever truly saw who built Israel, who profits from endless war, who controls the central banks, who manipulates the markets, who funds both political parties, who orchestrates the East-West dialect, who positions BRICS and the beast rival to the Western financial empire, who sits behind the digital currencies waiting to replace the dollar, then the illusion of democracy, conservatism, patriotism, and even nationalism would collapse in a single moment, as the people would recognize the beast system not as prophecy of the future, but as an infrastructure that already exists. So Candace's job is to delay that revelation, to absorb the shockwave of awakening and disperse it before it becomes destructive to the throne of the devil. And this is why she appears during every inflection point. This is why she pivots when her handlers pivot. And this is why she survives controversies that would destroy any genuine dissident. And this is why even her firing only expanded her influence. And this is why she has never, not once, exposed the families that built the world she pretends to fight. Candace is the counterweight the elites have placed inside the right as the West enters the prophetic fracture. So when the storm comes, the system wants two kinds of people: those who defend the beast and those who follow a rebel the beast created. Well, Candace leads the second group, and neither group escapes. So to conclude, in every age of upheaval, God allows the masks to fall. Not all at once, not in one blinding revelation, but in a sequence. A divine unlayering that exposes the machinery beneath the personalities. And when you step back from Candace and look at the entire picture, the rapid rise, the orchestrated conversion, the marriage into aristocracy, the Parler data operation, the Daily Wire crucifixion, the curated anti-Israel stance, the careful omissions, and the perfect timing, the pattern becomes undeniable. You are not looking at a renegade. You're looking at placement. Because her life only makes sense when seen through the architecture that we've spent years exposing. The Orsini Rothschild axis, the Vatican shadow hierarchy, the Bank for International Settlements financial priesthood, the aristocratic families shaping the Anglo-American order, and the intelligence networks that manage conservative consciousness like shepherds controlling a flock that believes itself free. Candace was built for this moment, not to lead the right to the truth, not to warn Christians of the beast system, and not to expose the dynasties behind Zionism, and not to reveal the financial throne that governs the nations, but to divert the awakening, catch the defectors, absorb the outrage, redirect the hunger for truth into a pathway crafted by the very powers that people are trying to escape. She is the net cast beneath the fallen Zionist narrative, the voice installed to manage the fracture, the shepherd assigned to keep the awakening within boundaries the beast can tolerate. She's not evil. She's instrumental. She's not the mastermind. She's the mechanism. She's not the threat, she's the insulation. So the true danger is not Candace. It's the empire that built Candace. The throne that funds her, the networks that elevate her, and the beast system that now uses her as a valve to regulate the pressure of the global awakening. Because the elites are not afraid of dissent. They're afraid of unmanaged dissent. And they're not afraid of rebellion. They're afraid of rebellion that reaches the dragon's head instead of its tail. They are not afraid of Christians waking up. They're afraid of Christians waking up too far, too fast, and naming the names God himself is unmasking in this hour. Candace is a chapter, not a threat. A signpost, not a destiny. A controlled flare fired into the sky to distract from the real fire burning beneath the world. The prophetic timeline does not hinge on her. It hinges on the unveiling of the beast, the financial, political, spiritual machine centered in Geneva, Basel, Freiburg axis, the counterfeit trinity preparing to enthrone its false messiah. Candace's story serves one purpose in that narrative, to reveal how meticulously the beast prepares his stage, and how carefully he cultivates influencers, and how strategically he deploys them, to keep the masses from identifying the true center of power. But the remnant sees, you guys do, the 9 of you watching me tonight, you guys see it. The veil's thinning, the scrolls are opening, and the register is returning. This is my job. And every mechanism of deception, from media empires to aristocratic marriages to controlled opposition, is being exposed before the day of decision. So Candace Owens, I'm sorry, is not the answer, folks. She's just an example. A case study in how the beast shapes its envoys, how the false prophet manufactures dissent, and how the system shepherds the minds of the weary and the awaking. So the real question is not who is Candace Owens, but the real question is who built her and why did they need her now? Because that answer leads not to Candace, but to the beast, not to personality, but to prophecy, not to her voice, but to the throne behind it. And that is where the true battle begins.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.